Hey everybody, welcome to the back room. I'm Andy Ostroy. We have Dylan O'Brien with us today. But first, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate you listening, and we'd love to hear your comments. So email us at backroomandy@gmail.com and our post on our social media, and we'll read some feedback next time. And if you like the podcast, please rate and review and follow or subscribe, and you'll be notified every time we post a new episode. So let's get to Dylan O'Brien. He is an actor who can currently be seen in the blockbuster film Saturday Night. Dylan, welcome into the back room.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks for having me.
So congratulations on the film Saturday Night. It's great. You were great in it. And Aykroyd, Dan Aykroyd, I found him such a complicated character over the years. His voice, which you nailed. So what was your process for getting inside, not just the character, but his voice, which was so... I don't even know what to call it, like Midwestern-y, unique or something, or Canadian or whatever.
It's so funny you said Midwestern-y. I, until doing this movie, thought that he was a Chicago guy or like a suburb of Chicago guy. I thought he was a Midwestern, literally from just the way, from seemingly his dialect. So I only found out that he was Canadian when I did this, which I found fascinating. He doesn't sound it. And it's funny too, just about the voice. I mean, it's sort of was kind of the nucleus of what I locked into initially with the audition. Like it was sort of my way into by the way, just to contextualize, my journey on this started very much with my not thinking that I was right for this part at all. So much so that I didn't even send the tape in at first. And then sort of the audition process got delayed with the strikes and everything. And once we came out the other side of it, they reapproached me. And at that point, I sort of entertained it further. And I saw the kind of like sketch that they wanted for the Aykroyd auditions. And I heard him in the sketch, and it was young Aykroyd. And I was very familiar with Aykroyd growing up, but more like 90s, 90s Aykroyd. And I'd never seen a lot of, this sort of like Aykroyd in his infancy, the 23-year-olds like doing a screen test for SNL. And I had never seen this sketch before. And I was like kind of fascinated with it. And I thought that, okay, even if I sort of physically don't think I resemble him, still, I can at least lock into this voice. I feel like I have this voice in my register. So I just kind of like laid a quick tape down, sort of doing an impression of him in the sketch, basically. And that was kind of it. I mean, I honestly do believe you kind of either have a knack for a cadence or something in your register, or you don't, and you can kind of work on it to an extent. So I did just kind of find that there was a version of him that I could achieve, at least vocally.
Did it involve like sitting and watching a lot of old stuff and just listening over and over to his voice?
Yep, over and over again. And I would walk around my little Airbnb in Georgia where we shot, and on my days off, because it's a big ensemble cast, there's a lot of downtime, and I would just talk to myself constantly like him. And mainly because, the identifiers sort of about his cadence to me were like, it's almost percussive. It's like it's kind of like staccato in its nature, and it's very quick, and nothing's ever like blurred together. Like he's very precise in his speaking. I think he's a very intelligent guy, and his brain is like lightning quick. I mean, the way the guy improvises is like it's a masterclass. And I'm much more of a for lack of a better word, inarticulate speaker, but somebody who's much more sort of, I can do this a lot. I'll scratch when I speak and be like, like things like that. I take a lot longer to find my words. He is somebody who I feel like in everything I've watched of his, he is such a precise speaker. And so that was something that I really wanted to, especially on a set when you're, going to be asked to improvise and be as that character, you kind of have to be equipped to, be able to handle that pace, I guess, which is like lightning speed. So that was sort of, I guess like an overview of how I approached the voice.
So it's really interesting. It sounds like the producers and the casting folks and the director, Jason Reitman, saw something in you that at the time you didn't see in yourself with regard to this movie and this character in particular.
Yeah. It was an interesting lesson for me, actually, to one, I mean, to not be the one to take myself out of the process, to not let my subjectivity sort of get in the way of, I mean, what I do is like an art, you know, it's a craft, it's an art thing, right? And that, you know, what's the main thing you say about, you know, you should not be the, you know, sole judger of the art that you're sort of like putting out. You know what I mean? It's kind of the purpose of it. It's open to interpretation. It's open to someone having their own experience with it, that you should not sort of get in the way in. So that was, you know what I mean? That was like a big lesson for me.
Sure. I would imagine it's in some way liberating, but also empowering to just go through that process with this particular film and that character and go, man, as an actor, I could play anyone.
Yeah. I no, that's a very astute observation. Like I've sort of always kind of self-cast myself, you know. Like I'll have an opinion on whether I'm right for something or not, you know. And yeah, I just think that's not always something that benefits me necessarily. And so going forward, I think it does sort of free you up in a way mentally after having an experience like this, where, I mean, I was positive that I wasn't the guy. I was positive. And, you know, they sort of saw it differently, and I kind of had to trust that and dive in. And, you know, and I came out the other side having discovered things that, yeah, I didn't see, and they were right and I was wrong, in terms of similarities that do exist between us that I can see now. You know, was
there a point at the beginning of the shoot where there was like something that was just challenging and you were like, God, fuck, I can't, it was just hard, and then you had to work through it? Or once you were there, it just fell into place?
Yeah, no, I think the former is sort of more accurate to my experience. Even just getting on the ground there and getting into the fittings and the wig and the stash, you know, that like doing the camera tests, I was very much like, okay, you know what? I'll get down there. I'll start getting in the clothes. Everything's going to come around, you know, and help me, right? It'll all help me. I'll get in the wig, you know, and I'll see it more. And instead what happened was I got in these clothes and I got in the wig and I got in the mustache, and I was like, fuck. Like I like had a panic attack, you know. I was like, not only do I still not look like the guy or resemble him, it's now turned into I resemble someone entirely different.
Laraine Newman. You look like Laraine Newman.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And then we found out they put the wrong wig on me, and it was all no, but it's you know, it was interesting once I sort of realized that I was never going to necessarily feel that way organically, that I would really need to, but I'm going to have to do this, you know. I'm going to have to sort of find a way to, at least temporarily while I'm down here, you know, doing this, I got to buy it. And I think a big thing for me was really relying on the certain, I guess, pieces of the film that, what do they call it? Sort of whenever you're doing like an accent for a movie, they call like your hook in kind of line. It's sort of like a piece of either dialogue or of scene or something that kind of you feel very confident about in terms of like the world of your character and your approach. That kind of gets you warmed up and gets you into it. And I kind of used that to a degree with some of his screen test. Really, I became obsessed with his screen test, and we were never going to be doing it on the movie, but it was something that I really turned to a lot in terms of like trying to nail and get down. And also just, it was so much of what illuminated me to his like improvisational talents.
What was his screen test?
His screen test is essentially him going for like 7 straight minutes, maybe even longer too, because the footage gets cut off that they sent to me. But he just he goes one after the other, cycles through about 5 or 6 different characters, and he's improvising each of these characters, and he's just riffing, and he's going so fast, and he doesn't miss a beat, and they're all different, you know, accents and different total humans that he's just created and written. And but but he just it's such a dense 6-7 minutes, like what he fills in that time is like it's fascinating. And that was a big thing for me. I was like, if I can sort of get this down, this will be like an anchor for me of confidence, and this can like lend itself to, even though I'm never going to be doing it, in the movie, this can like lend itself to moments that I'm fearful of on this, especially the scenes outside the lines a little bit, like, the non-sketch scenes where you're at least paying homage a little bit. You're kind of doing an impression there. You're doing something that exists. But the outside the line scenes, the ones where you're just having to color in him, who he is, off stage. Those are the things that were definitely scarier.
So in that casting process, of course, the biggest voice is the director. In this case, Jason Reitman. One of my favorite directors directed Juno, which is one of my favorite films of all time. What did it feel like to have somebody like that who, like his late dad, is a comedic genius, in my opinion, to have that faith in you at that stage in the development of the film when you didn't think you were right for it, for someone like him to feel like you were?
Certainly. It was exciting. What's funny is I still wasn't sold.
Jason, what do you know about comedy and casting? Okay.
It's like, literally no knock to Jason, because he's fantastic. And I think also in particular, well, I'll get to this. I really respect his casting taste, So that was something that eventually I was like, you know what? Who am I to be? I'm like, it's almost like it's so egocentric for me to be like applauding this cast around me and being like, wow, he's really nailed it across the board, except for me. You know what I mean? I'm like, why don't I apply that opinion to myself as well? Why don't I offer that to myself?
Right.
But in the audition, I was thrilled that it went that well and that he responded in the way that he did. And it lifted me like energetically in terms of the sort of, just the get of the job, that does a lot for you, especially you do this for years. And like, every now and then you have one go your way. That's like, you know what, that was a nice get for me. That's like a good little, I haven't had one like that in a while. You know what I mean?
Do you feel almost like, in a way, because you haven't had that, somehow you don't deserve it? Like, do you get in that headspace at all at that early stage? Like, why do they want me? I don't deserve it.
Oh yeah. I mean, of course it's, like, look, you're reading for stuff all the time. You know what I mean? And no matter sort of, no matter how much confidence you have in like your ability or what you can do that you haven't even may not have even shown people yet. You know what I mean? I think I've always sort of had an interesting relationship to kind of my own career in that I sort of feel like I'm just getting started, and that I have so much that I haven't gotten to, show or dive into in my career yet. But what you do realize is that people are always just going to sort of, see what you've done and kind of apply that to you, and it has to be something they've seen too. Like, it has to be something that sort of gets seen or gets some type of notoriety either. Otherwise it doesn't even exist for them, yeah, I mean, look, there's all kinds of feelings that the ebbs and flows of this industry will ignite in you. And I definitely was at a place of feeling, for me, it's more so like, doesn't necessarily have to do with like successes or in my career necessarily, or failures. I don't sort of, I think I do a good job of not riding high with the highs or low with the lows, but I'm more sort of, my ebbs and flows come from just like, almost like emotionally. Like, I sometimes am just like in a more creative space, and sometimes I'm in like a really creative space for, a year or two, and I'm feeling like in a really good flow, and I'm feeling like limitless in my like, in my sort of, I feel like insatiable in my energy to create, and then sometimes I'm feeling like a hermit. Like, I need to kind of take a step back. You know what I mean? Like, so I kind of follow that in a little bit. And in the way that this came up, when this came up, it was I was definitely in like a zone of like feeling like in like a creative flow. And I was just, yeah, I don't know. And I was just very excited that that I came out of the room that day with the win, and that it was going to be something that I was afraid to do, because that's always sometimes really necessary.
How cold was it for you going into this? Like, had you been a fan of the early SNL years? I know obviously you're just a tad younger than me, but and you weren't around in the 70s. But had you seen a lot of the early shows? Like, how much
Like,
exposure had you had to SNL, but also in particular Dan Aykroyd as an early SNL cast member?
not a ton. I'm familiar with SNL. I grew up with, a mother who really introduced me to it. And certainly, like, both my parents were big SNL fans. So they'd show me all kinds of things. Like, I was very familiar with John Belushi.
Mm-hmm.
I did the Blues Brothers for my third grade talent show. You know what I mean? So things like that were definitely they were definitely kind of in my ether. But in terms of like season one and like that early on with like Aykroyd, it had occurred to me that, yeah, I'd actually not seen a lot, especially with him. And I always kind of, again, even with my familiarity with the guy from Ghostbusters, and I mean, Tommy Boy was kind of like a favorite movie of mine when I was a kid. I think that's where I thought he was from Chicago because of that movie. He's kind of doing this like Chicago, car salesman accent.
Mm-hmm.
But I always associated him to be more of a writer than a performer, but kind of would be in the things that he also scripted, with Blues Brothers and Ghostbusters. I had sort of, this definitely was my first introduction to how skilled of a performer he was, especially young and on that show. I hadn't seen a ton of that. And that was like really illuminated for me. I was like, wait, this guy's kind of fascinating. What a fascinating person, because he was kind of this sort of quiet, confident kid amongst them all, right? I mean, he's probably about 7-8 years younger than Chevy Chase or something like that, don't quote me on that. But he was a kid, and he would write so many of the sketches, and he is also kind of a chameleon in his sort of ability to as a character performer, as like a sketch character performer.
In your research in doing the film and the character, are there sketches of his in particular that you look at and think that just really personifies Aykroyd? So, and what's your favorite? Like for me, it's Bag of Glass. I don't know if you've seen that one. If you haven't, you got to bag of glass, because it's just like a kid toy. Bag of glass is literally like a black.
It is just a bag of glass. Wait, no, I gotta see this. That's incredible.
And then there was this host. There was a talk show host in the 70s, Tom Snyder, who was just a freak. He smoked.
Yes.
And he would interview like Charles Manson, like crazy people, and he talked really fast. And Aykroyd, it was like a recurring character on the show over the years. And he just nailed it. So like if you watch the original Snyder and then you watch Aykroyd, it is just absolute brilliance, his impersonation.
It's really funny too, because actually I think their first cast interview was I think conducted by Tom Snyder.
Oh, really?
I believe.
Oh,
yeah, I think so. Maybe I'm getting that wrong though. No, but I'm pretty sure. Yeah, I really did like the I don't know if it personifies him necessarily, because what does, but like I really am a huge fan of the strumpets, the male prostitute reoccurring character. Do you remember this one where he played this kind of? They have me do it in the film. I would say one too many times, but they really wanted it to be in there. But he plays this. I love the way he performs it, because he plays it with like a sinus infection. Oh, like it's almost like he's like the guy who's like, you ordered I have a work order here to Roger you roundly, but it's almost like his idea of sort of making himself as like unappealing as possible was to kind of like have like sinus issues is what it felt like, and like his posture and like just a very, very unattractive man, essentially, being a high-end prostitute, which I find really, really,
Genius.
really hysterical.
It is genius.
And I also love, we do it in the movie, but I really do love the home invasion sketch too. I think it's a very clever sketch. And I think in terms of personification, that's sort of like, that was one I really turned to a lot for his voice. I feel like he really sounds like Aykroyd in that sketch,
Did you talk with him at all during the shoot, or have you had a chance to talk with him after? Like, do you know if he's seen the film and is like, kid nailed it?
Well, it's, you know what? He's not commented on me specifically, but he has said a lot of wonderful things about the film. He's like sort of been very generous about coming out and supporting the movie. I think he said it really captured that night, and I think he just really sort of he's very close with Jason. I think he's known Jason since he was a kid, obviously, and so I think he sort of lent a really sweet like kudos to Jason, because he absolutely directed the shit out of this thing. But me specifically, no, he did not comment on. And no, I never spoke to him either. It's funny, like I kind of was more comforted by that a little bit, in the fact that, how do I explain this? Like, if he was kind of the guy to be neurotic and controlling and want his hands in my performance a little bit, that would have definitely made me more uncomfortable than the sort of trust. And like, I kind of relate to that a little bit as a person. Like, I feel like, if I were in his position, I would totally have the same kind of, I'd be like, no, let the kid, I don't want to fuck with him. You know what I mean? Or get in the way of it, or make him feel like he needs to talk to me. You know what I mean? I just felt like he took a really, really like left it to be ours approach, and I respected that. And, I wasn't reliant on it either. I also didn't need for him to talk to me. If he wanted to, I would be happy to do it, And I'm sure he probably felt the same way. Like, I'm sure if I wanted to badly enough and really, really wanted to speak to him, I'm sure Jason could have made it happen.
Right. Something I read that I never knew was that in the 80s, he was diagnosed with Asperger's, as high functioning with Asperger's.
This I didn't know either.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I saw that.
I could see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, this kills my next question, which was, how much of that did you incorporate into the performance?
Well, it's funny, right? Because, well, listen, I mean, I didn't know of this theory or fact. So it's certainly not specific in there, but in terms of like a social functioning, a unique social functioning, I certainly, that was definitely a focus. And I think there's a spectrum of social functioning. We're all on it. I think that Aykroyd, certainly to me, appeared to be a highly, highly intelligent individual, and somebody who, I would say, in what might be considered to be a more unique socially functioning class, I would say, seemed to me like he possessed no insecurities, which was like this sort of quiet confidence thing. But so I mean, that doesn't surprise me. That doesn't surprise me at all. That's he was diagnosed as sort of being somewhere on the Asperger's spectrum.
Mm-hmm. And another thing that I learned through the film is I had no idea he was such a womanizer.
Yeah.
In fact, I had always thought of him as like some nerd who probably never got laid,
Right.
And he had an affair with Lorne Michaels' wife.
Allegedly, he was dating all of them. Yeah, allegedly. No, fairly, he was dating them all.
Mm-hmm. Good for Danny boy.
I know. I thought that was something that was interesting in the movie, not the being such a ladies' man. But the Lorne the Lorne piece with Rosie, you know, and Danny, and sort of it all being kind of known about. But I really particularly enjoyed how they handled the Rosie and Lorne dynamic. I thought that was like really well done. Yeah, and fascinating to know. I always, the way that I sort of like processed that piece of him was that he was more of a there was more of a comfortability around women. For me, like that's how I kind of interpreted it, you know, like not that he was kind of this, like, I think that's what made him so appealing to them as well. Like he wasn't a, you know, catcalling, like, you know,
Right.
You know what I mean?
It wasn't threatening, outwardly threatening.
Certainly not. No, I think he really, really, really respected and like was more comfortable with women. It was a read that I got. So it'd be interesting to know kind of his upbringing, you know what I mean? How accurate that might be. Or if I just got it totally wrong. Okay.
So what's up next for you?
What's up next? Well, I have a film that went to Sundance last year called Pony Boy. That's a sort of a love letter to North Jersey, early 2000s gangster movie that takes place on Valentine's Day. And also is the first ever feature film to star an intersex actor playing an intersex character. And that's a movie that I really, really love and am proud of. And that should be coming out. We should be hearing officially, but like I think that should be coming out this first quarter next year, which we're all very excited about. And then I have another movie that's very dear to me that I filmed last year that I also produced, also the first movie that I helped produce as well. It's called Twinless. It is a very talented young writer, director, and actor who he co-stars with me in it as well. He's a brilliant guy. His name's James Sweeney. I think he knocks it out of the park, and I adore that movie. And it was a 4-year journey of getting it made. And we're hoping to go to some festivals with it this year. But so, yeah, cross your fingers for that.
Any more Taylor Swift videos?
Not that look, I'm checking my email. Not that I've seen. I think one is enough for a lifetime in terms of the powerhouse that is that fan base.
Good luck with the film Saturday night. It's out in theaters. It's streaming. Folks, check it out. It's really, really good. And Dylan is great in it. Thanks for coming on and talking about it. And come back again and let's talk some more.
Yeah, anytime. Thanks, Andy. Appreciate it.
Alrighty. Take care. This episode of The Back Room was edited and produced by me, Andy Ostroy. It was co-edited and co-produced by Matty Rosenberg. And co-produced by Jen Hammoud. Our theme song was composed by Andrew Hollander. And our logo was designed by Cricket Lengyel. And special thanks to Patricia Wind. Please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, and also follow or subscribe. Until next time, keep your eyes on Washington, Hollywood, and your own backyards, and have a great week.